Garp training Luffy was probably one of the most crucial times in Luffy's entire life, and with so many different things that could have possibly happened, if he had taught Haki to Luffy prior to episode 1 while Luffy was still a child, it would have changed the entirety of the One Piece story by so much that it is absolutely crazy. A lot of the events that happened in canon would be changed in so many different drastic ways that you could not possibly fathom exactly what could possibly be different. This is really just one of the ideas that I had for a what if idea that I wanted to do in a very long series format. So if you guys do enjoy it, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. But with all of that said and done, yo, what's going on, Dawn crew, and welcome to the first video on this Pirate Dawn's channel. If you guys haven't already watched the introductory video, make sure to go check it out so you guys know exactly what this channel is about. But without further ado, let's get into the video. Our story begins off a little after Shanks had already left Fuchsia Village. At this point in time, Garp had just been returning, and it would just be around that time where Garp is taking Luffy to the mountain to be raised by Dadan. Garp seeing this and seeing like Luffy now having a devil fruit would have a different reaction than he did in canon. Yes, he's still going to be training Luffy the same way, just dropping him off in force and telling him to survive, but a lot of differences would truly occur. So we get ourselves started with Luffy and Garp walking. Garp is just looking and dragging Luffy basically around all the way to the point where he gets to Dadan saying that, why did you have to eat this devil fruit? Why did you have to do this? Like, stop all of this pirate talk nonsense. You're going to become a marine. You're going to become a marine. Luffy just coming right back at him and saying, no, I'm going to be king of the pirates. I'm going to be king of the pirates. They're just having a back and forth conversation like this entire time, all the way there. But Garp understands something now. In this timeline, Garp is going to completely know that there's going to be a very big difference in how Luffy's going to work. Yes, he's going to need to learn how to use his abilities to be able to survive in the world, but he also understands that Luffy does have some extremely high potential. So he would try utilizing that potential to the best of his abilities. By the time that they would make it to Dadan, Garp would have come up with an entire strategy. He's going to be trying to teach Luffy and Ace specifically, since both of them are people that are in Garp's care, how to use some abilities and some things that are going to be able to give them an upper hand in life. Give them an upper hand, especially once they grow up and grow old. So once Luffy and Garp would make it to Dadan, it would be the same situation. Garp knocking on the door, Dadan opening and seeing Garp and Luffy the exact same way that she did in canon. She would still be like, what's going on? Like, you can't drop another kid off on me. You already dropped one on. And it would be that exact same conversation where Luffy and Ace interact for the first time. They don't get along and they're really just rivals and butting heads with each other just completely and consistently. This wouldn't change whatsoever. But now that Garp has decided, you know, I'm going to actually put some time in and train these boys, he would start as soon as he would return the next time. He's not going to start training them now. He has to still get a couple of things like truly prepared. So it would still be the situation where Ace and Luffy are not getting along until quite a bit later. They would do their normal hiatus thing where they're just like really getting irritated with each other until Luffy would meet somebody like Sabo, and their relationship would start getting better and better as time goes along. Eventually, Garp would return, and it would be the situation where he would actually start teaching them how to use it, and he would be introduced to Sabo. This time around, I'm not going to have Sabo actively leave the same way that he did, because now he's actually learning something if he stays here that's going to be very important for him once he grows older. So it's going to be a very big situation of all three of them kind of learning from Garp. All three of them learning how to use these extremely nice abilities and extremely useful abilities that they wouldn't have learned any other way otherwise. So it starts off them all just kind of learning both armament and observation. Obviously, 2 of 3 have access to Conquerors, but I'm not going to give them Conqueror's Haki, like, you know, straight up, because of the fact of, yes, they have it, but they still need to unlock it in their own ways. And it's not just going to be like, oh, Garp drops them off in the woods the same way that he normally would, and boom, their Conqueror's Haki is now just awakened out of nowhere, and they're able to do everything. That would just, one, make the story a lot less fulfilling, and two, just not make it as an interesting story as it could possibly be. So I'm not going to go that specific route. As we continue on with the story, though, Garp would just be absolutely beating these boys senseless, if we're being honest. As specifically, once they're getting older and older, Luffy's control over his devil fruit is becoming a lot more pristine and a lot more precise than it was even in canon. He now has access to very low levels of armament and low levels of observation, but that's because he is still relatively young. This is still a couple years before any of them would actively leave to go off and do their own journey. So they're still like actively learning, but that entire situation with Sabo and all of that, as I said, doesn't happen. The only thing that would still actively happen would be the situation where Luffy gets captured because people are looking for Sabo, and Luffy would still not snitch whatsoever. He would keep it 10 toes down, keep his entire mouth shut, and just make sure that he just kind of deals with that entire punishment. This would be that still bond that solidifies them all as brothers, and that bond that really brings them all to that close, very nice knitness comparatively to like where they were all in canon. This would just be one of those things that I don't really want to change because of the fact that it is just such a nice moment in the entirety of the story. So it would just be a nice thing to keep that going around this entire time. And as Sabo never left, their bond is actively able to grow more and more between all three of them. And now all three of them are just going to be able to do and decide whatever they want to for like later on. And so it would be a very big situation of, as time goes along, is really a big situation where you could see that Luffy's abilities with observation are absolutely immaculate. Luffy has quite possibly the best observation and armament between the entirety of all of the group. And they're just all really noticing that Luffy is extremely special with all of his abilities. Yes, he has his devil fruit. Yes, he has all of these very nice knit abilities on top of the fact of him learning Haki, but he's just so good at these things that it is absolutely insane. Him learning observation Haki kind of mellows his personality quite a bit because now he's actively paying attention to a lot more things and he's noticing a lot more. So he's just a lot more intelligent as a full-on thing. Yes, he's going to still be extremely goofy. That's not going to change. We're not going to change his personality so much that he's an entirely new character. But now he would be a lot more logical and strategical with the moves that he makes. He's not just going to do all of the same dumb stuff in the same exact way, but don't get me wrong, a lot of it's still going to happen. It's not like, yes, as I'm saying, he's smart, but not smart. He's just right there as our normal Luffy that we kind of see all the way post time skip when he already has observation Haki and all of those other abilities. He's just a lot more carefree with a lot of the things that he's doing, if I want to explain it like that. So it would be a very nice situation where they're all noticing that Luffy quite possibly is the strongest between them three, and they have a lot of training. They have a lot of sparring matches, especially when Garp's gone doing off what he needs to do, and they make sure to keep up with their learning and make sure to keep up with everything that they do, to the point that all three of them are now very, very well off with what they're actively able to pull off. It would be a fairly big situation by the time that Ace would decide to leave, that he would just go off and go on, do the same thing that he wants to do, just kind of decide to create his own crew. But there is a very big difference. Yes, he's going to create his own crew, but now the fact that Sabo is still around, they are going to they've agreed to make a pseudo alliance between their three pirate crews. They're going to just basically be all under this kind of same flag, but go off on their own different ways, kind of as their own miniature fleet that all follows this exact same frame, this exact same group just 3 different places and doing whatever they want. So instead of the Spade Pirates, as it normally was for Ace, it would be an entirely different name that they all just kind of agree with. It would be a situation where they are able and allowed to choose their own names for their specific ship. So Ace could be going by the Spade Pirates, but it would be a very big situation where he's only like a bannerman, or like the ship is only a part of a larger group, which I'm just going to name the Brotherhood Armada, just to kind of give it a very nice looking feeling for it. So it would be a situation where he goes off, creates his own crew, lets himself like kind of do whatever he feels like, and eventually also still eats and ends up eating the Marinomi and the Flame fruit. So he still gains his abilities like that. I'm not going to change that because I really just like him being the Flame Emperor, like Fire Fist Ace. That's going to be the same thing that I'm going to leave that alone. It's just one of my favorite characters and like my favorite things in the entirety of the One Piece story anyway, so no need to change that. Eventually, Sabo would leave off to go deal with his own thing and go off to create his own crew, leaving Luffy behind as the sole person left until he comes of age and is ready to go along. Sabo would name his crew the Zephyr Pirates after eventually him gaining his own Devil Fruit. I'm going to give him his own special Devil Fruit, which I'm just gonna basically have it be pseudo Wind Fruit, and have it be just the Kaze no Mi, or the Wind Fruit, a Logia type Devil Fruit that allows the user to control and become the wind, which I think would really kind of suit him for a very nice thing. Obviously in canon he eventually ends up getting Ace's fruit, but Ace still being alive can't really give him that, and I want him to kind of also have a Devil Fruit just for my own fun imagination. So we're just gonna give him this and rock with that. So Sabo would go off, create his own crew. Obviously, this would be a completely original crew with entirely just new crewmates that don't exist in the story as of right now, due to the fact of, well, he was in the Revolutionary Army in canon and he's not now, so things kind of work differently. Obviously, he would be a part of the Brotherhood Armada, and a lot of things would just kind of start correlating because of the fact of him and Ace kind of starting off at around the same times and being able to create a name for themselves almost instantaneously would be a very cool and insane thing to see, because 2 people out of the East Blue just made automatic names for themselves in record time, to the point that people are very just surprised and shocked about that as a whole. Obviously, people would hear from Sabo and Ace that they hear their crew names and also hear that they are both a part of the Brotherhood Armada, up and coming fleet that is going to be led by 3 separate crews, which would be Ace's, Luffy's, and Sabo's as the 3 mains. They're just now leading the way for the 3rd person that's going to be coming in, and once he comes in, he's going to be causing a scene, and that's basically what they tell the world government. They're just the appetizer. As soon as Luffy comes out, oh, he's gonna crash out. He's going to come in swinging, and they both understand that. Luffy has had his Devil Fruit for the longest time. He has the best active grasp on his Haki and all of his abilities, and he is so much just a lot more strategic with a lot of his moves. There's a good possibility that by this point he would have probably actively been able to access something like Gear 2, maybe Gear 3, or even possibly something like Gear 4, due to the fact that he would already have Haki. So I could honestly make a fairly good case for him gaining something like just Gear 4 already, due to that singular fact. So honestly, why not? Screw it. Why don't we just go with that specific option? I'm going to go with the option by this point in time, he's already gotten to something like Gear 4 through all of the hellish training Garp has put them through. And mind you, if Garp trains them completely, they look a little different from what they did in canon. We saw what Garp managed to do with Kobe and 𝚘𝚘𝚝. He does that exact same thing with Luffy, Ace, and Sabo, to the point that they are very toned and very buff in their own form. They are absolutely in their peak physical prime, and it is an understatement to say that they don't know what they're about to be doing. Obviously, Garp wouldn't really enjoy the fact that two of his people that he raised are now pirates, and he would try pushing Luffy and more as like giving him even harsher punishments and like even harsher training. But Luffy's not going to be changing at all. So by the time the 3 years would pass and Luffy would be old enough to get started off on his own crew, it would be a very big situation where he just ends up wanting to get himself going, and he's still going to go that pirate route. Two of his brothers have already went, and he's the last person, so he is absolutely raring and ready to go. So Luffy would leave off. Ace and Sabo are already doing their own things, like making the names for themselves. Like Luffy has gotten like the full-on newspapers, seeing that they have like been causing havoc for the last like 2-3 years. Ace never actively ends up joining the Whitebeard Pirates this time around because he's not really focused on Whitebeard and like trying to like bring out a name for himself, I guess, taking on the One Piece in like that way. He's more just kind of focused on Sabo and Luffy and that kind of situation. So there's never going to be a situation where he's fighting Jinbei or he's doing any of that. And even if he did, now he absolutely like knows Haki to an extremely high level. So that fight would probably go a lot different than it did in canon. But that fight most likely just doesn't happen because he's not really focused on that as much. There's a lot other things that he's going to be focused on, specifically trying to get to the One Piece with his two brothers in that specific sense. So that's kind of what's going to be going on. Yes, they're going to eventually probably compete, but they actually have like no full-on things as Luffy. They all know Luffy wants to become king of the pirates. They're perfectly fine letting him do that and just kind of accompanying him along the way, which is what I'm going to say. If you don't believe me, go down in the comments and argue with yourselves. But besides that, Luffy would get off and head off on his own journey, like in the same kind of small boat and that specific thing, because like I don't really see a way that he would get even a bigger boat anyways. So it would just be a situation where he leaves off on the same small boat, gets still caught in the little whirlwind where he ends up in a bucket and still ends up on Alvida's ship. There's not really much that he could do to change circumstances like that. Eventually, you know, the story starts off, Kobe is able to open the barrel and he would absolutely run through almost all of Alvida's crew. And he would like run through them so easily. Like he already ran through them no diff in episode 1 in canon. Now, it's not even like he's not even bothering trying. He's basically just walking around and taking them out with just like half a look and just a small little flick. He would talk to Kobe. Like Kobe would be obviously surprised that somebody is like this strong. And he would hear about Zoro the same way. Like none of these events really would change whatsoever due to the fact of, well, it just has no reason to. Luffy would still end up finding where like Zoro is and still going to that specific location. And this time around, he just probably would go straight to Zoro. He would like obviously most likely come into the bar, figure out what's kind of going on, head over to Zoro, jump that entire wall, just walk straight there and figure out like the entire situation. And most of this kind of probably goes the same, besides the fact that Luffy could just cut Zoro out by himself almost instantaneously just using his own haki, and would just easily be able to like just get Zoro out of that without any big problems. Still managing to get Zoro to join his crew the exact same way by just grabbing his swords and dealing with that. That doesn't really change. Like this entire specific beginning wouldn't change whatsoever due to the fact of how would it? Like all of these events were basically out of Luffy's control for the most part. So there would be no real reason for a lot of these events to be so dramatically changed just because of the fact that Luffy now knows Haki. The only big difference would be the fact of like Iron Hand Morgan or like Axe Hand Morgan and Helmeppo and the entirety of the Marines on that base get done in so much faster. As soon as Luffy just jumps out of the window, makes it back to Zoro, Zoro accepts joining his crew. It doesn't even matter due to the fact of one, it's a very big situation of now Luffy is so much stronger than anybody there that bullets not going to be a problem. Anything that they throw at him, not going to be a problem. He just literally swings his arm once using armament haki and gets them all down out of there. Zoro notices that Luffy is quite honestly extremely strong, and he notices that this guy is going to be an extremely good captain, so Zoro would still obviously join his crew. I'm never going to change that. We love Zoro over here. And obviously afterwards, Kobe would still choose to stay with the Marines and become a Marine himself, which Luffy's gonna not really have any problems with. That's just kind of how the story would play out no matter what. And as they would leave, it would almost certainly end up the exact same way, where Luffy is still extremely hungry, sees a bird, and we end up ending on Buggy's plane and ending up where Buggy is in general. I don't see any possible way that changes, because Luffy's need for meat and food will never change in any scenario that the world could possibly give. So that would most likely just be the exact same every single time. Obviously, eventually, Zoro would manage to catch up to Luffy, and this would just be a very big situation where a lot of the events would be played out so differently because of the fact of, one, Luffy's not going to be as indifferent as this time around, and as soon as Luffy says what his crew name is, Buggy would be acting extremely different first of all. As soon as Luffy would meet Buggy and Zoro would meet Buggy, their entire relationships would be changed so dramatically due to the fact of, as soon as Luffy says he is the captain of the Straw Hat Pirates with the Brotherhood Armada, Buggy knows exactly what that means. That means Luffy is incorporated, or at least knows Ace, which Buggy and Ace actively had already met prior to the time that Luffy met him and got along swimmingly. So as soon as Buggy hears that, he would most likely free Luffy and they would just have a party for the rest of the night. There's not really going to be a very big issue on that end. I still see a situation where Nami probably ends up joining the crew just out of some circumstantial hijinks that would end up befuddling happening, especially with Luffy seeing what Buggy's doing. So they might start off having a party, but once Luffy sees exactly what the situation going around, him and Buggy would very, very quickly get into an altercation, just because, yeah, Luffy doesn't really mind a lot of things, but this would still be a very big situation where Luffy's just not going to let this slide and would prefer like this doesn't be happening. So him, Buggy get in an altercation. Luffy has Haki, so that chop and all of that not going to be really working out too well, because he's just going to be punch, getting Buggy out of there to the point that his like devil fruit doesn't even work correctly. And Buggy would be confused, mind you, but he would obviously know this kid has Haki. How does this kid have Haki? How do all three of these kids have Haki already? What kind of monster trained them? It doesn't make sense in his eyes. And obviously after seeing this, Nami most likely would end up joining the crew in the same pseudo way that she did, almost very identical to a lot of things. So most of those things kind of work out almost the exact same way, just due to the fact of maybe Buggy's body doesn't get completely separated because of the fact that Luffy wouldn't have done the exact same moves. He would have just used Haki and got the fight over with. So Buggy's body remains almost perfectly intact, so he doesn't have to go looking for it, or he doesn't have to like just go lose it and have to be like a fourth of a man for basically like 20, 30, 40 episodes. So that's the good part. But for the most part, that is where I'm going to be leaving this what if off. I know this is more of a shorter video than you guys probably wanted, but don't worry, this video will be a series, so you guys will be getting a lot more content from me in general. So please just hold your horses and tell me what you guys think about this video. If you guys have any actual ideas that you guys would like to see in this video entirely, please put them down in the comments and I would love to hear them and maybe add them into later parts that I will be posting. But with all of that said and done, I will see you guys in the next video. I hope that you guys enjoyed. Peace.